to take up much more time. I want to introduce our guest speaker today, Linda Stanley, talking about liquor, home and away. She unfortunately has some distant kinship to me, as most people that grew up on the side of that mountain do. But Linda, it's all yours.
It's good to be home. I've lived other places a whole lot longer than I ever moved here, but I still consider Floyd home. You know, they ask you where you're from, and I always say Floyd County. But you know, nobody, well, not nobody, I wasn't born in Floyd. I wasn't born or grew up either, but Floyd's always been home, and I guess it always will be. It's good to be back here. I'm going to talk a little bit today about other Floyd people. Can everybody hear me? Am I doing this right? I'm not real good at this. And I'm not a good speaker. I talk all day, but the reason I wrote down what I'm going to say is because I would talk all day, and y'all guys wouldn't know anything. Because, you know, I'm at that age where everything reminds me of something else. Oh, yeah, I remember this one. I remember that. Now see Hannah back there. She come to visit me. So, you know, it's good to see all of you guys here. I'm delighted you've come. I want to talk a little bit about liquor. I got some show and tell up here. You can look at it later. I got a few things I'll turn over. I hope I'm going to tell you some things you don't know. And if you do know it, just humor me and kind of listen and say, well, yeah, that was good of me. She reminded me of that. The whole thing about liquor is, you know, it's kind of like taxes. It's kind of like taxes on tobacco, taxes on this, taxes on that. Tobacco, you know, is an important crop. It made Franklin County down the road. And then it fell out of favor. Liquor kind of made a lot of us around here, and it was out of favor to start with because Uncle Sam didn't like us not paying taxes on our homemade liquor. And then it fell back in favor after we started going legal and paying taxes on it. So, you know, everything goes in a big circle. And now, you know, you can do it legally, but it's a long, drawn-out process to get that license and to make it work. So anyway, of course, you know, a lot of liquor was made up in Floyd. A lot of liquor was made down in Franklin. Franklin County got the title of being the wettest county because we had the most stills captured. I don't know if it was because Floyd hid their stills better, but y'all know this was a fact. So I want to talk to you a little bit before I tell you anything. We found in our research that a lot of Floyd County people were actually caught, but they were mostly caught down in Franklin. And y'all probably know that story. I used to think it wasn't true, and then some of the old folks told me it was. There was all these stories about how that on Friday night, my family included, would, and out at Dollar Ray Hatcher's place, would go have beat 'em up, shoot 'em ups on Saturday night at each other's place. And then on Monday morning, they'd be at the farmer's supply buying a stovepipe to put back up so they could have another one on the next Saturday night. That's just what they did. But the sheriff, whichever sheriff it was, if he didn't want to deal with the guys involved, he'd go move the county line sign over on Shooting Creek. Y'all heard this story? He'd move the line. And of course, you went by the line. And I didn't think that was true, but I heard later that from other people it was, and even Paul Sutton, Sheriff Paul Sutton, had a story about that. So you know it was true, and when you drive up there now, I came up this morning, there's not even a county line sign. I don't know where, how they can see this or what, but there's not even a sign. I guess there's something drawn somewhere. Anyway, I want to tell you a few things. You know, you can't talk about moonshine liquor without talking about the proven liquor conspiracy down in Franklin County. They had a big trial in 1935, and y'all probably know as much or more about that than I do. A lot of people, if they weren't from Floyd, they had Floyd connections. I think everybody's got a Floyd connection. Do y'all ever talk to anybody that don't know something about Floyd, or have somebody who lived here, grew up here? You know, Floyd and Franklin are just, I think, we're the center of the world, you know. So anyway, you can't talk about liquor conspiracy without talking about Willie Mae Collins. I hadn't intended to talk a lot about her, but then y'all got this drink going on, and I thought, okay, I don't want to miss an opportunity, and I might know something that you don't know. I kind of hope I do, but when I'm done, hopefully you'll know it all. You'll know everything, well, about everything I know about it. The thing about Willie Mae is that people that know something about her won't talk about it. And people that don't know anything about her can't shut up. I mean, how many stories have you heard? I just read a magazine article this week and said her real name was Diana Pearl. Well, we all know that's not true. She lived 58 years, and she did a lot of living in that time. She was a fast woman in every sense of the word. You probably know she was born out Checkway, and she was born December the 24th, 1902. Kind of a Christmas present for her parents, James Peter and Minnie Catherine Stump Collins. She left home to work in the dime store in Roanoke in 1918. Her employment record said she was 16 years old. Now, it didn't take her long to realize working in a dime store wasn't going to give her the kind of living that she wanted. So she hooked up with a bootlegger. Smart, right? The guy with the money. She hooked up with John Floyd Carter. They called him Floyd. And he was the son of a well-known bootlegger. If you read anything about moonshining around, you've heard of John Carter, because he was pretty famous. He made a lot of liquor, hauled a lot of liquor, but he had a network. And I like to think about it Amway. You remember the old Amway? It's kind of like that. It was that little pyramid thing, and that's kind of how I understand he made his money. But anyway, Willie Mae and Floyd Carter got married in North Carolina June 8th, 1927. She was 24 and he was 29. Remember that. This was an interesting marriage. They had a lot of experiences on the other side of the law. They were in court a lot. I could probably talk for 3 hours about the court cases. I had a stack this high of the cases. Most of them were in Roanoke City Police Court, Roanoke County. Spent a lot of time down there, and you know, you wonder how it all happened, but I like to think they might have funded the jail with their fines. Because, you know, the fines weren't much, but like it was $6.25 on a $10 fine. That's a lot of money. The ratio, you know, that's a lot of money. So I'll just talk about a few of them. Don't want to bore you. You know, I've heard that you can listen about 15 minutes to somebody droning on, and no matter if it's interesting or not, your eyes kind of glaze over. So as that comes in, since it's happy, I'll just, you know, and we'll stop a minute or two. In July 1927, Willie Mae and Floyd were caught with his father, John, in a dragnet down in Roanoke. They captured 85 people and charged them with violating the Prohibition Act. This was a planned raid in Roanoke, like the law knew it was going on, and they took action to stop it. It's kind of like in the movies, you know, they plan all this, they go in and they arrest the people, and they did. It's like local history that's true. You can't really make this stuff up. Willie and Floyd's end came when Floyd got sent to prison. He got sent to Atlanta, Georgia. A lot of people from around here went to the federal penitentiary in Atlanta. And he got sent for the second offense of violating the liquor laws. He said he was guilty, and they gave him 2 years for it. Willie Mae, of course, filed for divorce based on him being sentenced to prison. And it was finalized July 15th, 1929. They'd been married 2 years. But boy, did they do a lot of living in those 2 years. Willie Mae moved on and wound up being in a 5-year relationship with Charlie Sharp. Although they didn't marry, court records and newspaper articles, even the federal officials took to calling her Willie Carter Sharp. And sometimes you'll see it that it'll say Willie Mae Collins, alias Willie Carter Sharp. All the same woman, but kind of like my mom and daddy. I was saying earlier, I had to wait till Daddy to die to find out they were never married. But my mama took the name and carried it and died with it, and that's what everybody called her. She was Vera Nolan. You know, she never was Mrs. Amos, but that was the way it was. Didn't find this out until I was up in the courthouse running through there trying to find documents to prove this and that. And my mom finally said, wasn't no marriage. And I went, really? We've been celebrating July the 4th, 1944 for all these years, and you never got married? They meant to. See what happens when I'm talking about stuff. They meant to. You know that church, that log church between Floyd and Willis used to be on the right in the woods? Anyway, there was a preacher in there, and they went that Sunday to get married. And they sat out under a tree, and the guy went on and on and on. Daddy got mad and drove off. And they just told everybody they got married. Anyway, so back to Charlie. See, we got to stick to the notes or you'll never get out of here. Charlie come from a long line of bootleggers too. They were in court a lot as well. I think they might have helped build another jail. She was caught for speeding. It'd be $5 in cost, sometimes $25. She lost her driver's license once. But of course, she didn't stop driving, because driving was her livelihood. She had to drive, and she had to drive fast. Speeding. They were in the news for shooting at each other. She ran a car off the road once. She thought he was in, and he wasn't. And the guy she ran off the road didn't like it, and he sued and took her to court and all that kind of stuff. But she got out of that too. She said it was an honest mistake. Once they were in police court in Roanoke, and for cussing and threatening each other. The judge listened and then decided no violence was done, and he noted that the court couldn't fix any personal problems, so they went home. You can only imagine. They went home after being in court at each other, so it must have been an interest. And they lived on Shenandoah Avenue. They lived at different places in town. You can find them in the city directory. So some of her trials talk about her getting jail time. 3 days, 20 days, 10 days real often. She appealed some of them and avoided the sentence. And some of them, apparently, she just went to jail. I guess they knew her pretty well, as we keep saying. In September 1927, Willie Mae was brought to court in Roanoke on a charge of violating the prohibition law. The officer said he chased her for some distance in an automobile, and that Willie Mae threw a jar of liquor out the window, and it broke. It fell in sand. So the officer went out and scooped up all the sand. He said that the liquor stuck to the sand. So he went out and scooped up all the sand, took it to court. And despite his best efforts, the judge refused to consider the sand as being absolute proof that Willie Mae had thrown liquor out the window. I'm sure Judge Gino has heard things like that. Later in September, she was found guilty of violating the prohibition law. That time she was fined $50, given a jail sentence, but was suspended. In the same court proceeding, the same day, she was fined $5 for reckless driving. At the end of September, she was back in court, this time fined $10 for speeding. It's like they saw her every day. I guess there was no habitual offender law. I don't know. In November 19, we're still in 27. November 1927, Willie Mae and Floyd had been in court so much that a headline in the newspaper said, "Carter's up again." The story said the Carters figured rather conspicuously in the November term of federal court last year, and here they were again. But this time it was Willie Mae and Floyd and Floyd's father, John. There's a lot of trials in between, but September 28, Willie Mae was charged with violating the liquor laws by selling liquor out of her house in Roanoke. She, of course, said she wasn't guilty, but she got a fine and a jail sentence, but that time was revoked. She didn't go to jail. We'll fast forward to 1929, and she was facing numerous charges. She got a $25 fine for reckless driving in April, a $25 fine for a $5 fine for speeding, a $25 fine for speeding August 22nd, $25 fine for reckless driving in September. She pleaded guilty each time, just paid up, which I guess there was plenty of money. In April of 29, under a headline with little thought of safety, we read that Willie Mae was driving one of 3 cars zooming along Jefferson Street in Roanoke. Y'all know where Jefferson Street is today. And they were in and out of traffic in the business district. Now it was 6 a.m., but apparently there was a lot of traffic. They were clocked up to 65 miles an hour at Jefferson Street, 1929. The law thought the car in front was loaded with liquor, and the second one zigzagged along in the pilot fashion to prevent anybody from passing. The third car was loaded too, but it was loaded with police. And the paper said it was hot pursuit. You can imagine. See, wouldn't this make a great movie? The lead car escaped. The law said they knew who it was, but they couldn't catch him. And then the pilot car was overtaken, the driver was arrested. The reporter told the story quite well. He said at Elm Avenue, the Buick sedan in front swung from Jefferson toward Holiday Street on 2 wheels with tires screaming. That car, the pilot car, was overtaken at the bridge, and guess who was behind the wheel? Willie Mae was taken to the courthouse on charges of reckless driving and speeding, but she was released on bond. The newspaper said police have been on many liquor chases, but they described this one as about the wildest through traffic they'd ever experienced. You can only imagine. At trial, she was found guilty as charged. She was fined $200, got a 20-day jail sentence as speed woman, the newspaper said. Friends arranged the bond so she didn't spend the night in jail. And of course, she appealed the conviction. In 1930, her charges included displaying the wrong license plates on her Buick Roadster. They fined her $104. This apparently was much more serious than speeding than reckless driving. In March 1931, Willie Mae was fined $50 and sentenced to 10 days in jail in a hit and run and reckless driving case. The law said she attempted to block a police car from chasing an automobile that was loaded with illegal liquor. Of course, she was bonded for an appeal. In court, the officers said that Chase made a circle around the roads in the Casper's Hill area of Roanoke and wound up at the starting point. Willie Mae backed her car down the road after the first liquor car passed. It was safe and it was gone, so she backed her car down the road and she didn't stop till she hit the police car. She then sped away, and when they found her later and questioned her, she said what happened was her business. She was then drove away before they could give her a summons. This lady was nothing but smart, right? But in 1931, the hammer came down, kind of. She was found guilty of aiding and abetting in the transportation of 150 gallons of liquor, basically piloting. That means helping a loaded moonshine car get away from the law. She got out on a $1,000 bond until a hearing the next July. Willie Mae was driving her Buick sedan at speeds of 60 to 70 miles an hour, the law said, pushing a Chevrolet loaded with moonshine, and the cops were chasing them. It wasn't long till the Chevrolet wrecked in a curve. Both the drivers were arrested. Willie Mae said she didn't know the Chevrolet was loaded with liquor, and furthermore, she wasn't pushing it, she was speeding up trying to pass it. She was released on a $1,000 bond until that trial in July. And no, she didn't sit idly by waiting. She was nothing if she wasn't a show person. For a September 23rd, 1931 court proceeding in Roanoke, she sat on the top step of the balcony. I don't know if you've been to the Roanoke courts, but there's a balcony even today that overlooks the jury room. And so she was sitting in this balcony on the top step overlooking the jury room. The newspaper noted that she's regarded as one of the fastest and best automobile drivers in this end of the state. When her name was called, Willie Mae laughed. The crowd looked up the balcony to see her dressed in all pink. Every finger had a diamond on it. And then she went down to talk to the grand jury. In March 1932, she's still waiting for this trial for the transportation. Willie Mae and Charlie were in Roanoke Police Court on charges of shooting at each other in the corporate limits. Both got $25 fines. Charlie got an additional $5 fine, or $10 fine, for using profane language upon the occasion of being shot at by his wife. So July 9th, 1932 was the trial day for that 1931 piloting charge. Judge Henry C. McDowell sentenced Willie Mae to 3 years in the pen. The $1,000 bond she'd been out under while waiting for the trial was revoked, and she was took to jail during a lunch recess. The jury sat a day and a half hearing the evidence. Before the trial was over, she was out on a $5,000 bond for an appeal. During that trial, her attorneys contended that the government had not conclusively proven that Willie Mae knew the car in front of her was transporting a load of liquor. The driver, by the way, had already received 3 years in the penitentiary for transporting. The case against Willie Mae was said by a reporter to have been bitterly and vigorously contested. Judge McDowell heard evidence about Willie Mae's character. That must have been fun. Much of it was given by police officers who'd been involved in one chase or another with her. A Roanoke police lieutenant said he was chasing what he thought was a liquor car when Willie Mae rammed his car and wrecked it. Others had similar stories. One. It was just like an all-day thing of them talking about being in chases with her, being run off the road by her. I don't know that she ever threatened anybody with her mouth or anything, but boy, she did with the cars. At that time, she was facing a maximum prison sentence of 5 years and a $10,000 fine. At that time, the newspapers reported the way we understand she really looked. She was a rather heavily built woman with a broad face and white hair. She definitely wasn't model slim. The newspapers, though, were enamored with her because of the way she dressed, what she did, and just her general persona. When the guilty verdict was read, the reporter said she showed her first signs of nervousness. She twitched her hands. She changed the position in her chair. She was wearing a black velvet ensemble with a pink hat. But the newspaper reporter said she took that pink hat off when the opposing counsel began their arguments before the jury. And then she was out on bond awaiting the appeal hearing. When the pilot and conviction failed, Willie Mae prepared for prison. Her defense attorney, B.A. Davis Jr. from Rocky Mount, advised her to take the diamond out of her tooth before she went to prison. She did. And the story is the Davis family kept it for her, and when she got out, they put it in a necklace. I guess they got paid enough to wouldn't any big expense to them. Finally, she surrendered to federal court to begin her penitentiary sentence. Willie Mae arrived in style, as you might imagine. Newspapers said her car's engine and front bumper were plastered with American flags, there being no less than a dozen in actual count. Don't we wish we had those phones like we do now and could make pictures all the time? And then she was off to Alderson, West Virginia prison. That's a place for women. Y'all may have heard about another lady that went there a while back. Her name was Martha. So, and it still looks basically the same. I went up to look. You can see from the road down there. You can't drive to it, but you can see from the road down the river. She finished her term November 18, 1934. She'd served 27 months and 21 days of her 3-year sentence. Of course, the rest of it was for good. She got off for good behavior. Now, many of y'all have probably heard about Willie Mae being compelled to testify in the Moonshine conspiracy trial. That was in 1935. As we were saying, Floyd County, Franklin County people were implicated. It seemed like everybody in the world was involved. Willie Mae was an unindicted co-conspirator, which meant she had to testify, but anything she said couldn't be held against her. She couldn't draw a fine, she couldn't draw jail time. So she talked a lot, she talked about everybody. An hour or so could be used for that, of course, but I'll just touch on it a little bit lightly. Again, it was about taxes. The federal government didn't set out to prove moonshine was being made in Franklin County. They already knew that. What Uncle Sam's men wanted to prove was there was a conspiracy to cheat the government out of revenue, tax money, tax on manufactured alcohol. Between 1928 and 1935, the government said it had been cheated out of $5.5 million. In today's money, that's more like $100 million. Just imagine how much money that was in that day and time. The grand jury heard evidence, hearing the evidence first met October 29, 1934. They would indict the 34 men in the business in the Ferrum community of Franklin County, and there were 55 unindicted co-conspirators. One, of course, was Willie Mae. The trial started in Roanoke, April 22, 1935, and ran on until July 9th in the new, not air-conditioned courtroom in Roanoke. Now, Willie Mae was just out of prison, and she'd taken up residence in St. Louis, Missouri. She had left town March 5th after the conspiracy trial arraignments were made. She said a lawyer told her to do it. He said in court he didn't, so all we know is she went and she was down there. While she was down there, Charlie Sharp, who was the daughter of one of the defendants in the case, Willie Mae was asked on the witness stand if she was sorry Charlie and Mary Nicholson for getting married while she was in Alderson prison. She said no, Mary did her a favor. Of no small interest, Mary's father was D.A. Nicholson. He was a former probation officer himself, a former member of the General Assembly, and generally a stalwart character who just happened to make liquor and run it. He owned a house that Willie Mae lived in Roanoke and came in person to collect the rent. A woman who worked in the house told the newspaper reporter all about it. Rumors were that they were little more than renter and rentee. You may recall that Nicholson was found guilty in the conspiracy trial, but he wasn't given jail time. The court said on the record that his more than 300-pound weight was a factor in that. So when our historical society first started doing moonshine-related events and talking about the conspiracy and Willie Mae and the things that go along with it, I made the comment on, I was doing a TV show on WDBJ7 to talk about, trying to get some people to come. And I made the comment that Willie Mae had lived on Williamson Road, that she was said to entertain there often, and at that time, that section of Williamson Road was a haven for adult entertainment. There were all these little shops, and some of y'all might, I know nobody's been there, but y'all probably read about it. Now I mentioned that one of her frequent visitors was Mr. Nicholson, and I might have left the door open to some gossip. So shortly after, a woman who lived in Roanoke and was Willie Mae's relative called me on it. By phone, she told me there was no way Willie Mae was involved with D.A. Nicholson. She wouldn't have anything to do with him, she said, because he was too fat. And there you have it. So the conspiracy trial, Willie Mae was forced to testify, but she couldn't be found. The federal marshals finally located her in St. Louis, where she was staying in a rooming house. They allowed her to drive her own car back, and newspapers of the day wrote stories kind of chiding officials for not arresting her as a fugitive. After all, she was a material witness in this conspiracy trial. She was gone, they couldn't find her, but they let her drive her own car back to testify. She was Willie Mae. She would be the 165th witness in the trial, and by all accounts, the most colorful. She'd be asked if she was positive about things she was saying, and she'd say, "I ain't positive, I know it." She showed up in court in fancy clothing, at least twice in white outfits, once with a big cameo. She was pushed over and over to say how much moonshine she'd hauled out of Franklin County, or helped haul. She said she didn't haul an awful lot herself, but she piloted a lot of cars. So the judge and the prosecutors pushed and pushed to know how much, so she tried to come up with an estimate. She figured how many days, 365 days a year, she hardly missed a day. So between 1927 and 1931, she estimated 200,000 gallons. She told where she got most of it, who made it, where she picked it up, and which cops waved her on as she went through Franklin. It made a great story. Now that time period of hauling the liquor piloted, between 1927 and July 1931, this included the 2 months between the early May and July when she was waiting for a federal trial to be heard. She was still working. You know, you got to make the money to pay the fines, right? She said she made the trip about every day, even Sundays, and piloted as many as 10 loaded cars at a time. Each one of them paid her $10. The prosecutor in the conspiracy trial noted that that was profitable. She said, "Well, you wouldn't do it for nothing." The Rocky Mountain trip, the trip from Rocky Mountain to Roanoke is 27 miles, she said. She often made it in 25 minutes with a loaded car and cars in front of her, behind her. When she was at the conspiracy trial, she told the court she was staying with her parents at their home between Callaway and Ferrum in Franklin County. No mention was made of her mother's ongoing illness or the fact that Minnie Collins died June 17th. The conspiracy trial would not end until July 9th. She had a lot on her mind, but nobody knew it. So after the trial, Willie Mae moved on literally. There'll be some show and tell on the table after we finish, and you can look at some things. Of course, you know, we're a history bunch there in Franklin County, and we try to prove everything we say. So these are the stories that I proved or know to be true. Billie Mae would be involved in a wreck January 22nd, 1957. She was riding a Greyhound bus that rammed a stock truck in heavy fog in Baltimore. Billy Mae was one of 15 people hurt. Her right thigh was bruised so badly she was taken to the hospital. Interestingly, this wreck was just north of the Calvert Distilling Company. When her father died in 1960, Billy Mae came back for the funeral, and Mr. Collins' obituary, of course, listed her home as being in Laurel, Maryland. I actually have a picture of that house here. This is how it looks today, but according to property records, it's kind of a little bungalow, and you can look at it later. This side was put on and this side, but it's there right now today at 115 Irving Street in Laurel, Maryland. Billy Mae went on to become a waitress at the racetrack restaurant at the Charlestown Racecourse in Charlestown, West Virginia. That was pretty close to her home. And she was working there when she was sent to the hospital prior to her death. She and Robert, known as Spider, lived at 115 Irving Street in Laurel. The next important event, I suppose, is her death. Billy Mae Collins Brannon died January 26, 1961 at the age of 58. She'd been in the Charlestown General Hospital in Jefferson County, West Virginia for 12 days following a cerebral hemorrhage. The attendant doctor said that she had diabetes 3 years and hypertension at least 10. The hospital today is the Jefferson Medical Center. Billy Mae's young husband buried her with his relatives in Meadow Ridge Memorial Park in Howard County, Maryland. I've got a picture of her tombstone here that you can have a look at later. It's a nice bronze. About 10 years later, he married again, had children and grandchildren, and he's buried with his second wife. He was married to her for 44 years. So I guess your eyes are glazed over a little bit now. Does anybody have a question? Y'all got better stories than I do, I'm positive. I got a couple more things to say, but does anybody have a question or some comment or something they'd like to say? Yes.
Yeah, I want to ask you about the effect of moonshining on NASCAR drivers. More specifically, Curtis Turner and Junior Johnson.
Well, they learn to drive fast, they learn to navigate turns, and they learn to get away from the law, which helped them get away from the car behind them. I think it literally made their careers. It did many. There's a number of people on the smaller scale you can think of that got their start the same way. They learned to work on their cars, they learned to keep going, and then when they got on the track, some of them were lucky enough to have people to help them, but most of the time they got up and changed their own tires anyway. So I think it was a big impact.
Do you know where what the status is of the, I don't know if that, Moonshine Trail? That I know there was some work between Floyd, Patrick, and Franklin on developing, I think they had a different name for it, the Moonshine Trail.
It's the Virginia Heritage Trail. I was supposed to have a sign to show you today, but the county didn't come through. But it's the Virginia Heritage Trail. It's moonshine culture. And the whole idea behind that is between Patrick, Franklin, and Floyd, is to make a little triangle and to kind of showcase spots that are associated with liquor. Many of us have museums with pieces of history in it that relate to moonshining, or the things that moonshining had something to do with. And it's all about trying to make money and trying to keep us all alive. So it's still going. Patrick County has an event ever so often. We in Franklin County do events. We've got one coming up in September. I've got some flyers here. It's a Henry Lee Law from the Moonshiners TV show will be there, and we'll have several hundred cars that'll come. It's basically a car show down at Snow Creek. We've got an old Texaco service station that's full of old cars and memorabilia. There's even a waitress in there holding one of those little trays like this, and she cooks on the side of the window. Nobody here remembers that, but back in the day. But it's still going, and there's still things going on. It's just that, I don't know, things get overshadowed. I think it'll probably pick up a little bit. The Virginia 250 has kind of overshadowed everybody, and once that's finished, I think that we'll move on and do more. But this event today is part of that, I understand. And we'll be doing more. Hopefully we can cooperate a little bit more and get more people knowing about it. You know, it's not against the law to talk about illegal liquor, and we do it a whole lot. It makes us money down in Franklin County. We sell shirts in mason jars, we do all kinds of things to raise money. And I think there'll be more events, I think there'll be more talk about it. There's a romanticism with liquor. If you didn't make it, haul it, drink it, you still thought about it. Even today, even today. So I think that, I think it'll go further. So yes, it's still going. See, I told you, don't ask me questions. They just...
I have two questions. One is, what material, like, what was the basis of moonshine? Corn, like, what was the ingredients in it? And were there a lot of them, or did they concentrate on just using certain
Well, I like to
ingredients?
say that a moonshiner was a chemist. He wasn't a dumb bunny. He was a chemist. He had to know how hot to get this and how hot to get that. They used a lot of corn in here because we had a lot of corn. You couldn't grow a lot of stuff on Shooting Creek because it could come up around the rocks. So we had a lot of corn. But Henry Lee Law makes his out of barley and malt and rye. The rye is to tone it down a little bit so it don't burn you. Not that I know that, but that's what I hear. So they use different things, but they basically use what they had.
My other question was, like, when you did when they did the run to Franklin or wherever, how wide of a distribution did it wind up being? How far would it go after it went from point A to point B? Did it go?
Oh, it was huge.
Yeah.
People around here in Floyd, my family that I know about, took liquor all the way to Ohio and Pennsylvania. The rumor was some of it went up to Al Capone's place. He liked to say that whenever he served it, it was bootlegging, but when they served it in Mulholland Drive, it was just refreshments. But the rumor was that a lot of Franklin and Floyd County liquor made it to his place. So it went a lot of places. Most of the liquor in Franklin County went to Roanoke, and in Roanoke it went wide. They put it on trains, they put it in cars, didn't have tractor trailers there to speak of, so there probably been a load of those. But it went everywhere. Most of it went north though, because down south they could make their own liquor, they just made it different, it didn't taste as good. But down south they made their own, but most of it went north or a little bit, not quite to Tennessee because they had their liquor too.
Yeah, did you write a chapter on the lawyers and how much money they made representing her?
I'm seriously thinking about, we make books at our historical society and make money. And I'm seriously thinking about writing one. And B.A. Davis Jr., of course, I knew him and I knew his son and a lot of the family still around. And they have great stories about the things that they bought and they were able to buy because of the money they made off of moonshiners, bootleggers. So I think that would be a good thing to do. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if they probably didn't report it all, you couldn't look at the income tax, but I'm sure you could probably figure out from court cases. Because the cases we've talked about today, somebody was making money because she didn't get out on appeal just by going bat her eyes. So it took something to get her out.
The comment I was going to make is that Curtis Turner is a native of Floyd County. And, he was quite a driver. And Leonard Wood of the Wood Brothers told me one time that if he wanted to win a stock car race and nothing, everything was go, that Curtis Turner would win it. If he had to take off some bumpers and bump some people and, do a few things to win. But if you wanted to win a stock car race the way you're supposed to, without all of those tricks, that he would use David Pearson.
Yeah, I've heard that. Well, let me stop just a minute and say a couple more things if y'all not plumbed in. And then we'll talk a little bit more and maybe have some water and coffee and stuff. I don't have a lot more like we say, we could all talk all day and like hear some of y'all's stories too, but of course, Curtis Turner was another beloved member of the Floyd County family. And a whole nother hour could be used to talk about him. I mean, y'all know way more about Curtis Turner than I do. He had a lot of exploits, of course, but I'll just mention one story. Y'all are well familiar with his famous stillhouse turn on the highway. My mama was riding with him on Route 8 once on the way to Christiansburg, and he suddenly decided to turn around and go back to Floyd. It was in one of those old iron bridges, you remember, about 2 foot high iron railing on the side, and he decided to go back the other way. And he just stopped the gas and yanked out the emergency brake, they were going back the other way. So when they got back to Dollar Ray Hatcher's place, my mama said she'd wait and go home another way. She told me she never got in the car with him again. So he was interested on the track and off. And we've all got stories about that. If you haven't heard them, you lived them, you know. So my own father was given to some highway shenanigans. I'm sure y'all have got great stories too. I mean, you can't be around here and not have a story, hear a story, live a story. But it's hard to pick just a few of them. But back in wartime, my mom and daddy ran the Blue Ridge Cafe. Well, mama really, because I don't remember daddy ever doing much for pay in the way of working. And you got ration stamps then, you know, to buy things you needed. Tires was one of them. So Daddy used all the stamps he could get by whatever means to get 4 new tires for his 44. And he was out on Franklin Pike, kind of near the Nolan Mill. Back in the day, there was a pull-off there in my day, and the highway department kept gravel there. Y'all remember that little curve there? Anyway, that's where he was, and he was driving along, and you can imagine he wasn't going slow. And a tire blew out, and the car flipped over on the passenger side. There was a man behind him, and he stopped to see if he could help. The car was just there on its side, and there wasn't any movement. He figured the guy was not dead, he was hurt. So he sat there for seconds, and suddenly the driver's side popped open, and this man got out. He got up on top of the car, reached his pocket, pulled out his pistol, and shot out all 4 tires. Now, Mama told me this story, and even those many, many years later, she was still cussing about him blowing them tires out, as hard as it'd been to get 4 tires in wartime ration book. So I figured her story was embellished, you know. You just figured this stuff can't be true, right? So some years later, I was at a newspaper event, and this man was telling stories about the old days in Floyd County. And one of his stories was about being out on Franklin Pike, following this man down the road, and car flipped over, got out, shot the tires out. And I said, "What did you do?" He said, "I got back in my car and I left." I said, "Let me tell you, that man was my daddy." And he said, "What?" And it was. So then I knew the story was true, because this man that none of us knew told the same story. So I'm just going to tell you one more thing, which comes from the Floyd Press. Y'all may already know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. It was April 5th, 1917, and the Floyd Press had this story. The temperance folks, you know, were trying to convince everybody they weren't thirsty. And some of them got pretty innovative. The Women's Prohibition League of America had the idea of giving prizes of gold to kids who'd write an essay about abstaining from ardent spirits and such. Seemed like the deck was stacked, of course. $25 in gold was offered to the boy or girl in any Sunday school of the Southland who wrote the best essay on "Does the Bible Teach Prohibition for the Individual, State, and Nation?" The essay was to be between 1,500 and 2,000 words, and children between 15 and 19 were eligible for that one. Also, the Floyd Press said a $10 gold piece would be given to the boy in any high school of the Southland who wrote the best essay on the harmful effects of cigarettes. See, they weren't really good. The essays were to be typewritten, sent to the League's headquarters in Richmond by July the 1st, 1917. And there was more. The boy or girl in any high school in Virginia who wrote the best essay on the harmful effect of cigarettes would get a $5 gold piece. In Virginia graded schools, the boy or girl writing the best essay on "Is alcohol dangerous to the body?" would get a $2.50 gold piece. The graded school children were required to be between 500 and 1,000 words. Of no small interest is one of the winners of the contest. The annual Midsummer Conference of the Women's Prohibition League of America was held in Rice, Virginia, and the results was printed in the Times-Dispatch of Richmond, and the Floyd Press picked them up. The keynote speech of the conference, by the way, was titled "The Bone Dry State and What Shall We Do With It?" The speaker, the Reverend D.S. Poser, a crew, said prohibition's been the greatest question before the people for 3/4 of a century. Also, that we will not have a bone dry state until every state in the nation is dry. And if our people can whip king alcohol, we can whip all the Germans in the world. Now remember, we were fighting Germany in the war at the time, so it all went together. And prohibition would run from January 17, 1920 to December 5, 1933. This was when the government said people shouldn't make, haul, or drink alcoholic spirits. And the essay awards, the winners, the big prize winner was from Louisiana. And then came the Virginia High School winner, the boy who wrote the best essay on the harmful effects of cigarettes. Winning the $5 gold piece for his work was Clyde Bedslaw of Galax. Those of us of a certain age will remember that was the name of the doctor that gave us all our polio inoculations. Still got the spot right here. Dr. F. Clyde Bedslaw, 1900 to 1987, is well known to your historical society. And there's some interest, I think, in him winning that essay and then his career choice. So anyway, all right, that's all I got to say.
Linda, of course, you got me wanting to tell stories, and I'm not going to do that and take your time. We've got some brochures on the mountain trail, spirit trail, so they're back here.
Okay.
And I would invite everybody that wants to go by the museum and take a look. We have a 250-year-old still in there as part of the trail, and Hunter's here. He's been working, he's another intern, he's been working on our part of that for the display. So anyway, so you're invited. That opens up today 12 to 4 if you have a chance after we get through to run in there. It would be something. But the brochures are over here if anybody's looking for that. And I'm going to be quiet and let you ask me a question.
Well, I really don't have anything else to say. Y'all might want to come up and look at some of the things. I've got Billy Mays death certificate.
And you got a question back over here too.
Oh, okay.
This isn't a question, but it's an announcement. For those of you who like to read books, I checked in our library, and we've got a book that has got to have something in it about Willie Sharp. Hot Springs and Moonshine Likker, A History of Illegal Whiskey in the Shenandoah Valley, and it's by Llewellyn Bryant. That same author just this year published a book called Willie, the Rum Running Queen. And we've requested that. The library has granted that request. It'll be arriving in the library soon. There's also another great book that I have read that's in the library, Spirits of Just Men, Mountaineers, Liquor Bosses, and Lawmen in the Moonshine Capital of the World, which is referring to Franklin County by Charlie Thompson.
And that is the best book. I tell everybody, if you can't afford but one book, get the Spirits of Just Men book, because it tells why we made liquor and what happened to us if we did. So it is a great book.
Yeah,
The others I'm not that familiar with, but when you read them, just always say, what I told you is true, and be sure it matches. Because a lot of people go off toward Aunt Nancy's and they talk about all these things about Willie Mae, and they've got her died down in St. Louis, they've got her all this stuff, but she didn't, because we know where she died and so on. But the stories are good, and the things they make up, and the things that they tell that are true. So yeah, read everything you can. It's always fun.
Yeah, it is important to note that this new book, Willie Rum Running Queen, is not listed as nonfiction. But it's by the same author that wrote kind of a documentary book, but it's a little bit fanciful.
Get that book and read it and see what you can find out.
Yeah, as is a movie that the library also has called Lawless. And it is fictional, but is said to be historically semi-accurate about Franklin County's moonshine days.
Well, no. Lawless is a fake movie about a fake book about real events. And the sin, I mean, it's a great movie if you don't know anything about the history. It's a great book if you don't know anything about the history. But the sin of that book is that it used real people's names doing things they never would have done. And it has, for instance, it has Carter Lee, who was a prosecutor that was on trial in the conspiracy trial. It has him coming out of a Hub restaurant in town wiping chicken grease off of his face and using the word aid. This was the most learned man you ever knew. He knew the law like some people know the Bible. Back in, he was very learned. He was very intelligent. He never would have said the word aid. He probably didn't even know how to spell it. They had, I know that the lady that's in the car with her legs sticking up, what's the one in the red dress? Anyway, in the book, She's a Woody, and her children tried to sue everybody over this book and over the connotation in the book. And so they told him you couldn't libel a dead person. Well, it went on and on. But yeah, that's an interesting book. It's a shame most of it isn't true. But what should have happened in that book, and Matt Bondurant's one of our members, the author, when he came to town and said he was going to write the book, we got out stacks of information with the articles. And I thought it was going to be a real book, you know, but he told me real books don't sell. You can't make a movie about things, well, you could probably about Willie Mae, but you couldn't about most of the things. You can't make any money, and it's all about making money. You don't do this for your health, you know. Back in the day, people might have, but that stopped. But he said that when he came in, he and his father came in, and they were reading, and I said, the beauty of the whole thing is that the Bonner boy's father was a sitting member of the Board of Supervisors when this was happening, and he wanted to handle the government from cutting these boys and being mean to them, basically. And they said no. And I thought this was going to be the gist of the book, because, you know, that's great, but I guess y'all wouldn't buy a book about that. So anyway, but yes, Lawless is an interesting book. Not really true, not a lot of it's true. The names are true, but people come in the museum all the time and want to know if we're right next door to the hospital, and they want to know if that's the hospital they brought the Bonder boys to. No, it wasn't here. They went to Roanoke. What? Are you even from here? Well, no, I'm not, but they went to Louisville in Roanoke. But anyway, but yeah, it's an interesting book. It's certainly one to read and keep in mind that this is history in a different light, I suppose. Boy, I was bad on that one.
Did Willie ever have children?
No. She didn't have time, she's busy.
I have a friend I've heard about the book, I need to borrow it from him, read it. It's the book about the conspiracy trial, and he mentioned, yeah.
We sell it.
You do?
Yeah. Online it's $1,000 and more. We got it brand new in the shrink wrap from the author's house for $275. But
Well, now, was Keister Greer involved in the trial? How's he involved with that?
He wrote the book.
He wrote it, that's right.
He wanted to find Willie Mae. I wish he was alive now that I found her, but he's long gone.
Yeah.
But he wanted to find her, and of course he knew there was an abiding interest in it. And of course he was a lawyer, and he wanted to tell the story. And he did tell the story. Basically the book is a little hard to read. You need to put it on a pillow and put it in your lap. But what most of us did was we went in the back and looked in the index and found people we knew something about. But yeah, it's a great book too. And if y'all want one, we got them. Okay, we done now?
One quick question, and you'll know the answer. What was the annual tonnage of sugar shipped by rail car into Ferrum?
I can't remember.
It's in the tens of thousands.
Yeah, it's more than was used in Eastern
New York
Kansas
City
State.
or something.
Yeah, I can't remember. And then they said there was enough tin, you know, that would have gone, I forgot how many miles the tin would have gone. I didn't even think about bringing that information. It's not in my head. Gino knows. These guys.
No, I don't have a number, but I can tell you that there were 2 wagon loads of sugar brought to the top of Barton Spur every other day from the railhead at Ferrum, and that's wagon loads, which would have been stacked pretty high. A lot of canning going on in the day. Yeah, and that was just the Floyd. That was just the one trip, and it was the most sugar was sold at that store on top of Barton Spur, and that was in Franklin and Floyd, of any other place in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
I should know that. I'm sorry I don't. Get that boy's book and look in it because it says in the back. Okay, well, I thank y'all for having me to come. It's always fun.